newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian,
and there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Well, Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
Nobody wants to see
dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.
Well, hello there and welcome to Nowhere to Hide. I'm Brian Hyde. My job is to cast doubt on so much of what is being told to us by mainstream media. Now, it's not because I have a particular axe to grind so much as I recognize that we are in a battle for your mind, and people who aren't willing to think outside of the media narrative are very likely going to find themselves deceived. And so try as they might, the mainstream media may have its particular spin and a sense of itself as, the final arbiters of what is true and what isn't. Really, they're nothing more than narrative managers. But I want to put it in slightly different terms. In fact, I want to lean on my friend Connor Boyack, who is one of the better advocates for liberty that I know of. Connor puts it this way. He says, we are in a mind war. Powerful people don't want an informed electorate composed of independent-minded thinkers and doers. They prefer dumbed-down curriculum in the schools, heavy entertainment and social distractions, community infighting, civic apathy, and propaganda and punditry instead of truth. It's an intellectual and ideological civil war, and in any civil war, those in power see their opponents as traitors. Like Ron Paul always says, truth is treason in an empire of lies. So what does that mean for average people like you and me? Well, for starters, it means that we're going to be labeled extremists. Oh, you've seen this a lot, and it's getting even worse, as you're going to see in today's show. There are whole coalitions that are coming together, primarily people in power or people who are carrying water for those in power, and they brought their label makers with them in an attempt to try to discredit and smear and otherwise marginalize anyone who isn't marching in lockstep and chanting in unison with them and their young revolutionaries. It's a woke kind of effort. And so you got to get used to labels. In fact, the theme of today's show is lean into the labels. They're going to call you bad names anyway. You might as well just as well embrace it and speak the truth anyway. It's not so much about convincing them. It's a matter of convincing those people who are still trying to sort things out for themselves. When it comes to wokeness, what we're dealing with is a cultural religion that combines postmodernism, extreme political correctness, and Marxist oppression techniques. Oh, and it also denies that it exists, which is what makes it very interesting in the first place. So let's start with a story about diversity and equity. And let's see, what's the third one? Diversity, equity, inclusion. There we go. I know if you put it together right, it spells die. Which really seems to be kind of what they wish those not on board with this particular left-wing ideology would do. So this is from the LM Tribune from a couple of days ago. Idaho Education Board bans diversity statements. State education body cites concerns over free speech, makes decision without discussion. Oh, this sounds like a terrible thing. Why would they do such a thing? Well, let's look at the reporting of the article and first of all see. The Idaho State Board of Education on Tuesday voted to prohibit universities from requiring diversity statements when hiring employees. Now, the board made its decision without discussion during a regular meeting at the University of Idaho. The article goes on to say the decision applies to policies that require candidates to write diversity statements when they apply to Idaho's four-year institutions. According to the meeting agenda, the board is concerned that having faculty applicants demonstrate a commitment to diversity through a written diversity statement may lead to the university's hiring based on factors other than merit. Yes, like ideological purity, which is the whole purpose behind these diversity statements. State Board President Kurt Liebeck said in a Tuesday press release, hiring decisions should be made based on merit and the qualifications of the candidates who apply for positions at our institutions. Requiring written statements can complicate matters and take the focus off qualifications of individual candidates. We want to hire highly qualified people invested in the success of every student at our institutions. I think that would go without saying. But why would anybody question, the appropriateness of, but first we need to have a purity test. And I mean, come on, what's next? The political officer who is there to make sure that everybody is towing the line, waving the flag when they're instructed to do so? Please. So the meeting agenda states faculty nationwide have raised concerns these diversity statements violate First Amendment rights and academic freedom principles. But the board is not aware of any specific concerns from faculty in Idaho and is not aware of the extent to which diversity statements have been used for hiring decisions at Idaho's public post-secondary institutions. In other words, well, we're doing this, but we don't really know if it's a problem in the first place. Okay, all right, fair enough. Let's see what somebody who's paying attention might say about it. It's Senator Brian Lenny. He says, in light of the SBOE passing a resolution to curb DEI hiring practices, Idaho Ed News said, while the use of diversity statements has become a hot-button topic in national academic circles, it's unclear whether the practice has been commonplace in Idaho. Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot? Really? Senator Lenny says the SBOE staff even said the board is not aware of any specific concerns by faculty in Idaho, nor the extent to which diversity statements have been used for hiring decisions at Idaho's public post-secondary institutions. And he asked, so why pass a resolution? That's a fair question. Now, here are some of the receipts that he gathered earlier this year, many of which have been removed or the jobs have been filled. And by the way, you click on this link and it's a nice growing Google document that shows you exactly what these things look like, these diversity statement requirements in Idaho college hiring. So here are just a couple of examples. Here's Boise State University jobs with DEI requirements. Substitute teacher, Boise State Children's Center. Quote, Boise State University is building an inclusive community of faculty and staff whose unique skills, cultural contributions, work history, and perspectives create a rich and rewarding academic experience for our students. Research demonstrates that people thrive when they feel welcome, respected, and inspired. We seek applicants who are committed to helping us achieve our vision of a diverse and inclusive community. Applications from members of historically marginalized groups, including women, BIPOC, meaning Black, Indigenous, and people of color, those with disabilities, members of the LGBTQ plus community, those who served in the military, or members of other underrepresented communities are strongly encouraged. Well, there it is, right there in black and white, so to speak. It's, there are things more important than the person's ability or merit of how to do a job. They want to know, are you part of the oppressed class? This is classic Marxist oppression techniques. Here are a couple more from Boise State. Assistant professor in data science, mathematics. It requires a statement describing how your research program and teaching philosophy would address Boise State University's diversity and inclusion goals. I assume anybody who wants to be hired is going to have to be ideologically in lockstep with those goals. How about an assistant professor of film production? Applicants are expected to address in their letter of application how they will bring diversity and inclusion to the university, program, and community. We encourage candidates from historically underrepresented groups to apply. I know it's, so basically reverse discrimination. I mean, if you have a very highly qualified candidate who happens to be a straight white male, I mean, what are his chances? Probably not good, would be my guess. Here's University of Idaho jobs with DEI requirements on their website. Executive Director for the Center on Disabilities and Human Development. A cover letter highlighting your qualifications for the position, including how you will advance the college and university's commitment to building a diverse and inclusive educational environment. You get the picture, right? I mean, there's many more than this. I just took a very small snapshot. Senator Lenny says, stop pretending it's not happening. It has been, still is, and will continue to happen until we codify it into law. And he says, I have a plan to do just that in the next session. Look, diversity can be a good thing, and it happens quite naturally. You will find that no two people are exactly alike, and people bring different strengths and different weaknesses and different talents to the table for any number of projects. But this is an ideologically steeped effort to try to weed out people who aren't dancing to the woke tune that the piper happens to be playing at this moment. It's not a good idea. It'll stifle people's free speech. Where public dollars, by which I mean taxpayer dollars, are being used to help support these institutions of higher learning, it's not a good thing to do. So, yeah, it would probably be a good thing to see prohibited by law so that they're not tempted to sneak it in some back way. I don't know, maybe the secret friends of the Library Society. They seem to be pretty good at sneaking things in that really have no place in the library itself. That's a story for another time. All right, let's talk about a little more media hysteria. Look at this headline. Look at this. Abortion rights attorneys help patients and providers navigate legal chaos. Helpline has been consistently receiving hundreds of calls every month since Roe v. Wade fell in June of 2022, advocates say. This was Idaho Capital Sun. Now, look, prior to 1973, there was a long time, like over 100 years, where abortion law was pretty simple. We covered this in the last episode. And basically, a person who caused a woman to miscarry without this express purpose of saving the life of the mother. In other words, if you were someone who just provided the means or you caused it to happen, you could face a felony charge and face, I think it was either 2 or 5 years in prison. That was done out of respect for the sanctity of life. And guess what? Idaho grew first as a territory, then became a state in 1890, and became a great state on top of that. Roe v. Wade came along in 1973 and imposed a one-size-fits-all approach on all of the states. Nobody can say no to abortion on demand. And it was rightly overturned because it was an overstep of federal authority on the part of the Supreme Court back in 1973. So to pretend that, well, this is terrible, it's legal chaos. If we can't be killing these unborn children, at will, how could anybody possibly, have a good life? And the hysterics are carrying over into a number of other areas as well. Let me show you a couple of other headlines that help to illustrate this. For instance, there's the headline that, healthcare practitioners are now leaving the state because abortion is so hard to provide. Thanks to Senator Scott Herndon for some well-deserved context. He says Bonner General, Kootenai Health and Boundary Community all report 0 induced abortions over the last 10 years. In other words, they weren't exactly abortion clinics. People weren't going there for their abortions. So when they claim that abortion law is the reason for closing labor and delivery, we know that's not true. It's a product of changing demographics. In fact, he goes on to say, it's also the competitive environment, the state of healthcare, and changing business models. Kootenai Health operates successfully in the same legal climate. He says rural hospitals across America, regardless of abortion laws, have been closing labor and delivery as the methods of healthcare services have changed over time. I always have to wonder, too, about the idea of when we paint abortion as healthcare. I think of healthcare in terms of we're trying to get a sick person healthy again. What exactly is the disease that's being cured when we equate abortion on demand with healthcare? Now, to some people, that's a very extreme thing to suggest. How dare you suggest that people be responsible for their behavior, including behavior which could result in the creation of new life? I know, it's wow, is he really going to go there? Is he going to suggest there's right and wrong? Yeah, actually, I am. And I'm going to do so not because, I'm so much better than everybody else. I think we gravely undersell the importance of what people before us have learned. It's not like, suddenly we just discovered, hey, did you guys realize that, when a man and a woman come together in this way, it could possibly result in a pregnancy. It's been understood for thousands and thousands of years of human history. And during that time, billions of human minds have worked on the problems as well as the benefits that have come from those sexual relations. What's very interesting, though, is we've seen the good, we have seen the bad, and when barriers have been put up, or at least boundaries have been established, saying, it's better, it's in the interest of society that, for instance, guys don't go around having sex with any girl that they can convince to have sex with them and siring children that they have no intention of raising, that has a negative effect on society. And if you don't believe me, go spend a little time in the inner city where bastardy is, I don't know what the percentage is now. It was in the high 60% rate 30 years ago. I think it's much higher now. And when you subsidize it with welfare, you get more of the same. In fact, you take away a woman's benefits. If she were to do the right thing and settle down and marry the father of her children, no, we have to take away your benefits. So you're actually encouraging people to have children out of wedlock. And I think the inner city and the crime, the hopelessness, the gangs and so forth are testament to what happens when you break down the family unit. Now, again, that's a very unpopular thing to suggest because we have this woke crusade trying to redefine the family as anything but a man and a woman together in a lifetime commitment and the children that they raise by virtue of their relationship. Some people take that as, well, if you're saying people can't have children, then it's not real. Look, that's the exception. There are infertile couples out there. I was adopted. My parents were not able to have children of their own. So I understand that very well. But the norm is when a man and a woman come together in a permanent relationship, children are more often than not the result. None of us would be here if it hadn't happened at least somewhere along our own personal timeline. But that's seen as a very extreme thing. In fact, a lot of the things that we once considered not just normal, but just, part of traditional, this is life, and why would people even question it, have been pushed to the extremes to where if you stand up and you say, look, right and wrong exist, a person who reserves their sexual behavior for marriage and practices fidelity within their marriage is going to be in a more stable situation than a person who does not. That's considered a very extreme thing to do, and it'll earn you some real hate from people who, for whatever reason, are pushing the exact opposite. I actually saw a very interesting video just a few days ago of a minister who was comparing, and specifically, he was comparing the LGBTQ plus agenda to traditional Judeo-Christian ethics. And he made a very convincing case that it's a religion. It's a false religion. And for instance, he gives the example, okay, what did Jesus tell his followers? He told them, take up your cross and deny yourself and follow me. Oh, and he also taught them, be meek, be humble, right? Someone slaps you, you turn the other cheek. If someone sues you, you let them take your cloak as well as your coat. If they compel you to walk a mile, you walk 2 miles. What is this LGBTQ plus religion based on? Hey, do whatever is you. Do whatever you feel. Love is love, right? Oh, and pride. No humility to be found, no meekness to be found. It's all about pride. It's all about, you take pride in whatever, you want to do and threaten violence. In some cases, engage in violence against the people who say that's not right, especially when it's being promoted to kids. So how do you get people to hate what once were traditional values? Well, first of all, you try to convince the kids that this is all outdated, superstitious, evil stuff, and it has no place in a modern world such as ours. All right. We're going to talk actually a little bit about some of the parallels between what's happening in America right now, as well as other first world countries, and what happened in Mao's Cultural Revolution from an actual survivor of China's Cultural Revolution. You'll be surprised at some of the parallels. But in the meantime, how do you get people to accept things which most normal people are going to recognize in their hearts? This just doesn't seem right. Well, you have to find a respectable face for tyranny. Here it is. These folks sat down with smug Brian Holmes from KTVB to talk about this new anti-extremist coalition. Oh boy, taking on extremism in Idaho. Idaho Leaders United is a new group formed in Idaho to combat extremists posing dangers to our communities with a goal to disarm extremism. I wonder if they chose that word deliberately. By the way, congratulations to any gun store owners in Coeur d'Alene. Since Washington State passed its assault weapons and magazine ban, I expect you're going to have some pretty booming business, kind of like the cannabis shops in Oregon have some pretty booming business because of what's illegal just across the state line. Nonetheless, look at these people, pillars of the community. A former sheriff, you have corporate leaders, you have people. Look, it's so respectable. But what exactly are they standing up for? See, that's the key. It's an anti-extremist coalition. This is from their own website. ILU messengers leverage their personal and professional networks to speak out against bigoted and violent appeals and remind fellow Idahoans that we are better off when we work together across divides without resorting to extremism. Now, what do they consider extremism? Certainly not people wanting to dress up in lingerie, men dressing in lingerie and wanting to read saucy tales to the kids in the library. Certainly not gay pride festivals. No. What they consider extremism is people who say this is inappropriate for our kids and I won't have this. Or I don't want young men who say they identify as women going into the locker room or going into the bathroom and invading my daughter's private space at school. That's the kind of extremism they're going to stand against. Antifa, another left-wing extremism, recruiting and grooming kids, to the LGBT ideology. Oh, that doesn't really exist in their minds. That's a problem. Here's what they also say. Violent political extremism is once again emerging across our state and threatening the safe, secure Idaho we know and love. Extremism poses a dangerous threat to our public safety and civil society. Now, this is, again, the perfect example of the bogus predicate, the unspecified predicate. What exactly do they mean by extremism? It's a very nebulous word, and that's deliberate. It's supposed to alarm you. Like if someone says hate, ooh, hate, that must be bad. Well, so is extremism. But you're left to make your own emotional associations as to what that actually means. And that's why it's kind of devious, because this only runs one way. The only extremism that they're concerned about is that which would keep people on a path that calls for limited government, personal responsibility, freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, private property rights, basically all the conservative values that really were what made Idaho such a safe and wonderful place in the first place. I wanted you to see, I think it's Scott Herndon, State Senator Scott Herndon, responded to the video that this group put out, saying, it's strange that the story featured video of a group of non-Idahoans being arrested in Coeur d'Alene. They're talking about the Patriot Front, alleged Patriot Front members who were fixing to apparently get ready to some point, maybe possibly disrupt a gay pride rally. And then one of the group's leading speakers issued Democrat Party talking points in which it claimed that our abortion and minor genital mutilation legal policies are driving legitimate healthcare practitioners out of state. His point is simply this. He says it's pretty hard to depoliticize the rhetoric when your group is all about political rhetoric and polarizing talking points, including opposing Idaho's current abortion laws and exercising liberal use of the word extremism. So, what do you do when someone is calling you an extremist? And yeah, they're very, very happy to use that word. I mean, it's being thrown around a lot. The press picks it up. They chant it incessantly. What do? Well, you lean into it. That's what you do. Take it away from them and make it a point of honor. Case in point. Stop Idaho Rhinos from Twitter posted this. I thought this was a great little graphic. Extreme against the sexualization of children. Embrace the extreme. That's how you take away their momentum. And by the way, normal people, decent people, people who understand right and wrong will see this and they're not going to think, wow, that means take a gun and shoot as many people as possible. That's what the LGBT extremists are doing, particularly within the trans community. They claim it's a genocide. We have no choice. We have to go out and kill people. And of course, they have people in powerful places, including within the press, that are covering for them. I like this take from a tweet. Again, this is from Stop Idaho Rhinos. We are calling on Idahoans to crush the curve and embrace the extreme. Don't let them control the narrative. Never before has it been labeled extreme to have patriotism and a desire to protect the young and innocent. And these are some of the extreme things they suggest. I suggest maybe that you sit down or have someone hold your hand if you find these things extreme. Stay married. Have the babies. Go to church. Homeschool the kids. Protect all children. Speak the truth. That last one's a really painful one. Be extreme. Look, they're going to call you the names anyway. You might as well get maximum juice for the squeeze, and don't worry about what somebody's saying. Don't worry that, but it might hurt my feelings. Look, all of us at some point are going to come to the end of our lives, and we're going to look back on not so much, well, how much money did I make? How many titles did I hold? How many people did I own on the internet? What we're going to be concerned with is, what kind of person was I? Was I a person who did good things with my life and with the time that was allotted me, or not? And if you're the kind of person who says, well, I saw evil things or I saw injustices taking place, but I didn't want to speak up because, somebody might have called me names or maybe they wouldn't have invited me over for tea. Would you really rather have to explain that either to, to your own conscience or maybe to your loved ones gathered around your deathbed as you're on your way out? Well, I was a good person. I didn't speak up because I didn't want to risk somebody, putting a label on me and thinking that I was extreme. Or would you rather be able to say, there were people who hated me. There were people who talked me down, who shouted at me, spat on me, and otherwise did everything in their power to smear me and punish me for speaking the truth and for standing up to what I knew or understood to be right. But I did it anyway, and I did it because it matters, and I did it as an example to you that in every generation such people are required. I know which one of those scenarios I would rather choose. That's why I'm running my big fat yapper like I do on a daily basis. All right. So be extreme, own the label, crush the curve. Don't let anybody try to intimidate you into silence. And here's one of the reasons why. I want to share with you, this is the experience of Lily Tang Williams, who was a survivor of Mao's Cultural Revolution. And she says, here are some of the revolution features and tactics. Now, you can judge for yourself if these look similar with today's American woke cultural revolution. Number one, Mao started Cultural Revolution to purge his political enemies and become a supreme leader to control entire China. His campaign slogan, destroy the four olds, traditional ideas, culture, habits, and customs. Number three, arbitrary division of society using critical class theory and identity politics, dividing people into oppressors, that would be the 5 black classes, and the oppressed, which were the 5 red classes. Number four, quasi-religious indoctrination of urban youth. This is what we're seeing right now, and it's waving a rainbow flag. Red Guards shut down schools for years for them to do class struggles full-time, promote division, hatred, envy, and equity. See, the only thing we're missing there is the diversity and the inclusivity, right? Number five, toppling down statues, putting big posters and spray paintings on the walls, riots, looting, violence, law enforcement told to stand down. Kind of seeing that a lot these days, aren't we? Number six, change school or street names, change words and definitions, censor words, burn relics, temples, and churches. I wonder how far we are from that point. I think probably closer than any of us really want to admit. Demonize all the religions as cults, promote communism as the sole ideology. Mao is a godlike leader. If there's one thing totalitarian doesn't like, it's moral authority, and especially a moral authority that's higher than the state. Also, they involve struggle sessions, public shaming and denouncing, self-criticizing, apologizing, thought reform, re-education camps for the black classes, the oppressor classes. Also, they taught that you were guilty at birth, by relationship, by association, past words, deeds, lose jobs if you don't comply, silence is violence. That was Mao's form of cancel culture. Next, family and neighbors turn on each other. Children were told parents are not dearer than Mao, urging teens to change their last names, their dead names, perhaps, to cut ties with their black class families, to show loyalty to the revolution. Then you redefine social norms, promote unisex, genderless society, girls dress like boys and soldiers, create confusion and social chaos, banned dating in schools. Press and media were controlled by the Chinese Communist Party and used for propaganda daily. Cancel individual merits, silence dissident voices from all professions, ban books, songs, music, art, and comedies that are not politically correct. And finally, using mob tactics of fear, intimidation, torture, and violence, no rule of law, 20 million people died. Many committed suicide, including intellectuals and party officials who supported the regime. Now, I understand the people who are pushing the current woke crusade would probably beg to, well, you don't see all of those things happening. No, I don't. It's not a, detail for detail transfer. Oh my gosh, we're doing exactly the same thing. But there is a similar trajectory. And that's the point that I'm asking you to consider. The further we stray from the principles and practices of liberty and limited government and government that exists to enforce and to protect our God-given rights, as opposed to enforce whatever the collective thinks is best at the moment, we're drawing closer to the same kind of totalitarianism. And frankly, we have some tools that are available to those who want to maintain power that Mao could only have dreamed of. But look at the effort to corrupt the young minds, to build that fervor in the minds of these young children. And particularly, we got a bunch of Gen Zers who are now coming up on election age where we're finally going to be able to vote. The only thing you're not seeing in their hands is some form of little red book that they would carry around to show them what the dear chairman would want them to believe and what he would expect them, to stand for. Instead, they're carrying things that look like rainbow flags, and they're embracing, gender confusion. What was the thing I saw? There was an article just in the last couple of days. Something like 1 in 4 high school students right now, at least according to this survey, say that they are LGBT. That's a huge shift from previous generations. Kind of makes you wonder what happened. I'm going to go with it's a battle for the mind, and someone is spreading a mind virus. And you and I have the ability to counter that mind virus, not by being violent, but by simply living up to the traditional values of get married and stay married, have children, take your kids to church, teach them to read, teach them what freedom is, teach them to stand up for it, homeschool them if you have to. Maybe limit their interaction on social media, because that's where a lot of this mind virus seems to be spread. And yes, you will be called extreme for it. Lean into the label. Own it. Make it so when someone calls you extreme, they're paying you a compliment. That's the only way we're going to win this thing. I'm Brian Hyde, and this is Nowhere to Hide.
Are biased, the Idaho Press Club are biased, all media, newspaper, radio.
To be completely blunt here, Brian,
And there are plans to expand
indoctrination.
That's right.
Idahoans are also concerned.
Horror shot. That line would be moving a little bit farther west.
I'm like crying.
nobody wants to see.
Dark money is influencing policy in our state.
Well, that's not how this works.